What the heck? It tells me I've got a poor connection. Should we just do it anyway?
Uh,
It went
well,
away.
you could stop and just look at it and see if that's really affecting the quality or not.
Let's just let it rip, dude.
Okay.
Let's just do it. All right, so Donnie Revolinski, good to have you here. Thanks for being on my podcast. I thought this was going to be really fun because I grew up with you, and we've done a lot of creative projects together. You're a film producer. You have a record label. I think people want to hear about these things. And there's a lot of really great current events that we can dive into as well. We started out, we signed up as a team to get our video classes together in 7th grade at none other than the Beatbox with Roland Wells here in town. That was a youth program. That was incredible. I mean, that kicked it off, man.
I think it started my entire sort of career in the arts and my interest in all things film and music.
Yeah.
For sure.
And so you're still actively producing music.
Well, I sort of came full circle with it because I started with you in the beatbox, and that was learning how to use a camera and learning lighting and camera angles and, mise en scène and all of that stuff. And then I decided that, filmmaking wasn't for me. I was more interested in sports and I didn't have enough time. And that was my high school. But then in college, since we were at the same university, I rekindled my love of all things film and slowly started growing my skills, started working on other people's films, and then all of a sudden we decided that, hey, we've only, ourselves ever tackled a short film, but clearly the next thing to do is a feature film. So then we took on a feature film.
Yeah, well,
And
so in the spirit of the podcast today, I'm wearing that shirt of Stomping Grounds, and then I see you've got
Grounds.
Ronald Clay, your other feature film, in the background poster. That's awesome. I mean, dude, we were 19 and 20? 19, 20 when we did Stomping Grounds.
I think so.
It
Yeah.
actually blows my mind because, look at us now.
Yeah, it's like a full decade ago. It's wild.
Literally, we could do the 10-year anniversary release DVD with commentary. It'd make it like the
Clearly,
gold.
we should monopolize on that.
Yeah, it'd be a real moneymaker.
Capitalize. Whatever.
So, dude, I saw you at the protest yesterday. Also, I didn't mean to interrupt your live recording. You were on the phone.
Oh yeah, don't worry. It was live. Things happen when you're live.
I was just cracking a joke, but okay. So for our listeners, we're both in Fairfield. Yesterday was the Black Lives Matter protest, and I'll be totally honest with you. I wasn't sure I was gonna go. In fact, I was pretty decidedly not gonna go until within an hour of the event, and I was actually asking myself why, because I don't know. We're getting into the subject now, so I imagine it'll spark some controversy. But I wonder if it's like a white guilt rally. I wonder how much of it is just people, mainly white people, trying to show that they're a friend, which, even if that's true, still totally necessary and appropriate. But the whole thing just kind of feels like, in a weird way, alienating and fueling the same kind of separation that we don't want to see.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so necessary. All right, so that was like me 2 hours before the protest.
Okay.
And then as time went on, I was just like, okay, I'm gonna go. Especially, look, I'm a video guy, so I show up with the camera. Yesterday I kind of took the journalistic approach of just showing what it is, supporting my brothers and sisters, friends of color, and I actually left like very uplifted. It felt really good. I'm curious though what your experience of it was.
Yeah, man. I mean, I don't think anyone at the protest is saying that anyone should be ashamed for the like skin color that they're born with. No one should feel ashamed for being white. That's how we were born, you and I. But what we should like bear in mind is that people who were born black don't enjoy the same level of freedom in this country as we do.
Yeah.
And I get that, it could feel alienating, and it could feel like, okay, like they're making this about race when we should all be coming together. But this is part of our privilege. We're not used to feeling uncomfortable about race. We're used to, I mean, I grew up thinking that the like race protests of the civil rights era were behind us, and I couldn't believe that my parents' generation like was alive. Like my dad was alive when that was going down. When people were marching, when Selma, Alabama happened, and all that. And I think what's become apparent to me through like the creation of Black Lives Matter and all these other sort of organizations that have sprung up along with it is that actually racism and civil rights is still very much alive, and it's still very much at issue. And I don't think that there's a subject that shows that sort of polarity, discrepancy between how black people of color, and white people are treated than police brutality, because police do not brutalize white people almost ever. And you see so many instances of unarmed people of color just getting killed for no reason.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy didn't need to kneel on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes. He just didn't need to. He was already handcuffed. It was like the most blatant police brutality I've ever seen. And to me, like this is about standing up for rights for all of us. That's how we come together. Is by standing up for the rights for people of color. We are standing up for our own rights as well. Like I don't feel safe and I don't feel free in this country unless everyone else is also safe and free, regardless of the color of their skin. And it's like we're two white guys talking about this. Not necessarily the like greatest take. And I hope you bring on people of color to also talk about their experience, their lived experience. I remember at the protest here in Fairfield, Raphael Green, aka Fooch the MC, I thought spoke really well, and I thought he would be a really good guest to sort of talk about his lived experience, because he's dealt with a lot of racism over the years, and his daughter, he said, is like still dealing with racism. And this is 2020, this is like 60 years after civil rights, 50, 60 years.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And honestly, after everything else that's been going on, the pandemic. Look, we're
dealing with two different pandemics.
I've like
pandemic
literally
of racism and the pandemic of coronavirus.
Yeah, I was just I had so many things running through my head going into it. Everyone's wearing a mask. I was wearing a mask. I was taking certain liberties walking through crowds with my camera, so I just didn't want, I just wanted to be as neutral as possible, especially when you have a camera, because that's like super not neutral. And it was really wild actually to see people. There was just murmurs in the audio and the video, but people going like, I don't know if I want to be on the camera, like just talking to their friends and stuff. I actually think that's a real shame, because it's a public event, it's a protest, and I think now is not the time to not want to be seen. I think we're well past that.
I agree.
But
100%.
Anyway, I took the civil, respectful approach, and I was trying to be as courteous as possible. But yeah, I just thought it was really important. I just wanted to show what happened. I got the video footage and then, several hours later uploaded it on YouTube, which I was kind of proud of. That's like, I don't know, heck, that's what CNN does. But
Nice. Yeah, well done.
anyway, it was a good feeling. And my gosh, like for me currently to get like 300 views in less than 12 hours is like, woo, I think I touched on something. But yeah, I mean, it's what a trip. The mask thing. I mean, we're doing this interview via Skype in our
Yeah.
own hometown because we're taking precautions, and as I understand it, you're looking out for some people that might be at risk, and I commend you
Yeah.
for that. But
Anyone over the age of 60, man, they're all at risk. But in particular, a couple of relatives who are very close to us are particularly at risk. So that's why we insisted, why I insisted, we'll just be honest here, why I insisted us doing the interview by Skype rather than in person.
yeah, that's good. I don't know if this is a good segue or not, but I want to hear about the music label, the record label. Is it still records? Are you putting out records?
Yeah, well, I mean, depends on your definition of records, I guess. Yeah.
When did you
So,
start it?
technically, so my record label is called Vibe.Digital Recordings.
Vibe
It's
dot
spelled
digital, right?
it's spelled Vibe.Digital. But I usually just say Vibe.Digital. And the record label side of it started in March of 2018. And it's before that it was it was its own sort of musical podcast. It started as a radio show that I was uploading as a podcast in Iowa City. I had a radio show at the university there, 2 hours every other Saturday, and that went over pretty well. I was fairly plugged into an electronic music scene that I had slowly sort of gotten into over the course of maybe 4 or 5 years. I mean, so I guess I have to kind of go back in a way because how I got into this scene was just by sort of delving into. I got very bored of the bass music scene at the time in the United States, which was almost entirely based with dubstep and with like future bass. And I just was like, okay, like these are great genres, but they're not for me. Particularly dubstep was sort of like a toxic culture here in the United States. Very cliquey, very exclusive. I never really felt like I could ever get anything going with dubstep when I was trying to like produce it, when I was trying to, get bookings, when I was trying to book other people. It just didn't, there wasn't a lot of support. So I wanted to find a scene that was more inclusive, that was more positive, and where people were more interested in collaborating and playing shows and all of that. And as it happened, Plastician, who's this like long time, he's like at the dawn of grime and dubstep, he was there releasing physical records. I don't think he does anymore. He doesn't release vinyl anymore, but he was releasing vinyl for a decade or more. And his Rinse.fm show in the UK was like the dare I say the stomping grounds of this
Sure.
new musical scene called wave music. It was like this subgenre. It was sort of like a cinematic, emotional style of bass music with like a big influence from trap, a little bit of influence from dubstep, from vaporwave, a couple of different, several different genres. A bunch of producers come to it from, a lot of different people have their own take on what it is. But anyway, so wave music was a thing. And before it even had a name, I was clocking on to the sound, and Plastician was playing it on his Rinse FM show. And that was, I think, like that was where it was having sort of the most success, because it was like an official radio show. He was the longest running Rinse FM DJ and probably getting as many or more plays than anyone else for every one of his like podcasts, 2 hours every Tuesday. And we were all sending our music into him, and he sort of got to decide, like, okay, I like this song, I don't like this song. And if you got like a play on the Rinse FM show, that was like the bomb. That was like, okay, you knew that you made it. That was a milestone. And when I got my first play, I was like, okay, like maybe I'm not just a hobbyist with this music producing thing. Maybe my music is actually good. And that was the first
I
time
love that.
that I ever had the confidence to think that.
That's
was after
awesome.
Plastician played one of my songs. And it was really from that, like from the Rinse FM show, I met my boy Jordan Wilkinson, and I met Brett Happenew, who I ended up, the three of us run Vibe.Digital recordings, and I met both of them through Plastician's Rinse FM show. And so yeah, I think the first time Jordan and I met, we collaborated on a song, and we're like, oh, let's make a beat and send it to Plastician, you know. So we did that, and then he ended up liking that beat so much that he signed it and like put it out on a compilation album. And it's still like one of like my most. Honestly, it's like it's 4 years old now, and it's kind of embarrassing almost, because him and I have come so far in terms of our like skill with producing music, but it's still one of our most played tracks.
What's the name of
like
it?
Spotify.
If people want
It's
to
called
find
Rebirth.
Rebirth?
By Fumes and Mingo. And I'll make sure I'll send it to you here.
Yeah, we can link it in the description when we get to cutting this together. But yeah, I'm sure people will want to listen to that. What else is on Spotify? What?
Yeah, so I mean, so mostly the scene came up on SoundCloud, at least to begin with. That's like where we were all uploading our music and sharing it and commenting on each other's songs and reposting and all of that. But SoundCloud doesn't really pay you anything. It didn't pay you a single penny at the time, but Spotify does. It pays you like, I think, a third of a penny per play. So that means like 1 million plays is around $3,000. And some artists, not very many, but like maybe a couple, have actually made a living just with Spotify plays. It's like really wild. Anyway, basically what happened with Plastician's show is eventually he decided it was time for him to end his tenure at Rinse FM. And he decided to, I think he had like a second child, and he needed to just bring in more money, and Rinse wasn't paying him anything to do his show. It was sort of like a volunteer effort, even though he had like massive amounts of street credit with being the longest running DJ there, and it probably got some bookings. He just wasn't making that much money, and he needed to put his time into making more money. So he stopped his Rinse FM show, and then all of a sudden there was this giant void. You know, it was like, where is our scene? What are we doing? There was some guys in the UK. There were several radio shows still happening in the UK at the time. But there was no one who was really like pushing the United States sound for wave music, the North America sound. So I was like, okay, like I can at least showcase like some of these guys. I can get 2 hours of airtime in Iowa City. I can play the first half hour, and then I can have 3 guest mixes of a half hour each from different people around the U.S. People are like eager and ready to put mixes together. I'm just gonna do this, and it was a little bit of a struggle in the first maybe 10 episodes to find guests. Sometimes it took a lot of work on my part, asking a lot of different people, but at some point my radio show was like a syndicated radio show for this style of music. Then it started being easier for me to get guests on board to join me. And one thing that started happening was that people were sending me music, like unreleased music, to play on the show to sort of, get it heard, because I actually had listeners. Each episode was getting a few thousand plays. It was a way for people to get their music heard. And in particular, my homie Jordan Mingo, who I collaborated with on that track Rebirth, he sent me this one track called Missed Call. And it was like, at the time I remember thinking that this is so good. Like, you should send this out. This needs to get released. And there was like 3 record labels at the time that were releasing this like style of bass music, wave. All three were based in the UK. There was no United States record label at all. He sent his music in to all three labels. He got three rejections, and it was like back to square one. Is like, what am I gonna do with this, dude? I was like, what the hell? What is going on? Like, this needs to get released. Someone needs to release this song. Who's gonna release this song? I'm gonna release this song. It just like dawned on me. I was like, okay, like I already have the platform. I already have people coming and listening to the podcast. I bet you I can just turn Vibe.Digital into Vibe.Digital recordings and start releasing music. And Jordan's song was the first single that I ever signed, and it's like the third most played song we ever released. And that's like what started it. And then we signed like a couple other singles, and then we had a compilation, and then we had an EP and a single, and an EP and a single, and another and a much larger EP, and that was like 2018. You know, I think we did like 9 releases that year after we started in March. And then by the end of that year, it was becoming apparent that there was enough support for us, for Vibe.Digital recordings, that we should start pushing our own live shows as well. So live shows started popping off. The first official Vibe.Digital show was in Chicago, and I think the second one was in New York City. And then I ended up moving, I think, was it 2018? Yeah, later in 2018, I moved back to New York City, and then I started networking. There's a really excellent community of creative, musicians and recording artists out there, and I started networking. I started like going into clubs and making connections, and we found like the like most ideal like small club with a dope huge sound system kind of environment, and we started putting on shows there like once a season or so. We found some other clubs like the first one was called Mercury Lounge. That was in Manhattan, in downtown. It was like very glitzy and glamorous to be there, honestly, playing a show in Manhattan, on a dope sound system. It's like, it sounded great. And it's probably my single favorite venue in the United States right now.
I have a question for you. I mean,
yeah.
So you were in New York doing that, and now you're back here in Fairfield. I wonder how you compare like both creative lives, how much of it you attribute to, say, maybe the internet, and how much, I don't know, what do you get out of being here, and what brought you back to Fairfield, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. So the job brought me out to a job brought me out to New York City. I was working for the David Lynch Foundation. And basically what happened was I had the option of just, I was pretty firmly entrenched in Brooklyn, living in Brooklyn, working in Manhattan. I had a pretty excellent network of people out there, but I wasn't like, as far as like my own like personal financial goals, I wasn't really like putting a dent into my own like debt and all of that. And I just was thinking of this as like, okay, I'm in a great situation, socially with the record label. But much of what was happening with the label was still, it was, hold on, I'm just going to full screen this real quick because it keeps trying to turn on the screensaver. Much of what was happening was still happening online. And I sort of just thought like, okay, like my personal financial situation isn't improving out here, even though I love it here. And my dad, his small business, which was making it was a cooking oil manufacturing business that he sort of had on the side for a long time. Yeah, he makes ghee.
Well, you help him, don't you? You still work helping him out?
Well, I mean, the reason why I moved back from New York was because the ghee business was taking off. It was like his sales were like going through the roof. And it became his like full-time gig. He like quit his other jobs so that he could make cooking oil. And I was like, okay, like there's an opportunity here. I can help my dad grow, the sales. We're at like 10 to 15 times the level of sales like when I started, And so we've had to hire on other people. Like we're automating some of the process. Like it's a business that's definitely growing. We just put in a loading dock that like semi trucks can like back into, so that we don't have to mess around with deliveries.
Man. That's so cool. I mean, you produce music and you produce key. It's so good. I mean,
Yeah.
I think every artist to some degree, I mean, honestly, that's the best key in the world. But I think,
Appreciate
artists, musicians, as you were talking about plastician, sometimes, money calls, and not just sometimes, probably always. And you have to diversify to some degree. And still, there's a lot of people just trying to carve it out just so they can do their art,
Yeah, for sure, man.
It's crazy. It's good, though. It's a good struggle.
Yeah, well, I mean, so to answer your earlier question, there are no shows happening here in Fairfield, Iowa with wave music. There's no shows happening in Iowa at large with wave music. Like the closest shows that happen are Chicago. So I'm still like promoting. I still have my contacts with the various venues in New York and Chicago. And my buddy Brett, actually, one thing he started in conjunction with Vibe.Digital Recordings was Vibe.Digital Agency, which was basically some of the artists that we would sign, he would then turn around and do artist management for and get bookings for them. And so now he has a network of clubs like around the country in various cities, promoters and different clubs. And so like Boise, Idaho is one of our biggest cities. Like we've played in Denver, we've played in Seattle is one of the biggest towns there. There's like a huge wave music support in Seattle, tons of different producers and collectives up there. Portland and several cities throughout Northern and Southern California. And yeah, it's turned into this whole sort of like national network that Brett pushes, and that like Jordan and I sort of assist Brett with when as needed. But Jordan and I are mostly on like the Vibe.Digital Recordings side and running the podcast, which the radio show has continued. I stopped broadcasting from Iowa City, but it moved on to sort of a live stream that we were doing online. And then the pandemic hit, and now everyone and their mother was doing live streams with music until the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, Breonna Taylor protests, and now everyone stopped. So, and like half of the people are, actually physically at those protests now. So it's just wild how everything, like how far everything has come. Like I could have never imagined we would have been in a, health crisis, a pandemic from a novel virus, this year. And I never ever would have imagined that we would have had these like international protests against police brutality that are being met with enormous amounts of police brutality. It's like the police are making the protesters' point better than they ever could have by themselves.
I do agree with that. Yeah.
And yeah, anyway, so it's just wild the times we live in. And now, even though, like you said, even though we're living in the same damn town, we have to have this interview like 1 mile away from each other via Skype.
Yeah, weird times. I think what gets me about it too is that like I'm talking to my parents, obviously, and they're equally, if not more so, like, what the hell, which to me is like really telling. That like you and I can say like, hey, in our lifetime, nothing like this has ever happened, but in their lifetime, it's like things have happened, but not to this kind of scale, meets internet. It's like I want to believe that we're coming together, and yet there seems like there's so much division, like an insurmountable amount of it. So I'm really curious to see how we're going to pull out of this. Yeah, I mean, like, heck, I just kind of announced to the world, I'm going to do a podcast like a week ago. And it was in the back of my mind for years. And I don't know what the actual catalyst was. If it was just like, you know what, I want to get people on here to talk and express ideas in a format where, you know, like, sure, people can still dislike this video and say a rude comment or whatever it is, but it's just different. It's like, because this is a dialogue versus something on Facebook, which seems to be very strongly opinionated. It's over much too quickly, and then you usually just damage a friendship.
That can happen. I mean, yeah.
I mean, I'm doing my best to avoid that, and I'm trying to sprinkle in a little humor here and there as well. I feel like people are very entrenched in their ideas and beliefs, and I'm sure I'm guilty of that too. But I'm just not seeing the ability to carry on in terms of a dialogue or a debate. I think that as a trending issue, especially for our generation, there needs to be like a great unifier, which I'm just not seeing. Like if
Yeah, man.
if we got like Facebook as like, you know, bestowed on us, and this is like our workhorse, and this is like, wow, so lucky to have these phones and this, you know, technology. I'm just not seeing it like I want to see it, you know? You think it would like connect us in a way that like doubles protest numbers, or it doubles support for X, Y, Z, but I actually feel like it's dividing us by 2 and 3 and 4, 5, you know. It's scary. And then you realize that, hey, you know, everyone seems to have an opinion and a group and a tribe. I wonder how we get away from that and back to like a grassroots type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I think, different groups of people, different, you know, special interests who have a stake in keeping us divided. Whether it's a foreign country who wants civil unrest in the United States to destabilize our power abroad, or if it's a political party that seeks to divide and conquer the populace through gerrymandering and, you know, issues that like abortion or like racial violence, police brutality, that they, you know, that where folks try to make it about single issue voting, you know. My sense is Facebook, I mean, there's like a few major social networks. There's Snapchat, there's Facebook, which also owns Instagram, and there's Twitter. My sense is Facebook does not do nearly enough. Of all the social networks in particular, Facebook does not do nearly enough to fact check the random articles that people are sharing. It should be, you know, I think we would have Facebook generally would have a stronger platform if they did fact checks about information that is like easily provable to be false. You know, it's like Hillary Clinton killed 50 people. Actually, no, she didn't kill 50 people. She didn't kill anyone. But the fact that that kind of misinformation was allowed to spread sort of played into people's confirmation biases. And then all of a sudden, you know, the more articles you read about this that's playing into your confirmation bias, whether it's on the left or the right, the more sort of divided you're becoming. And Facebook is just sort of deciding to take this sort of like Switzerland, like non-intervention kind of approach to it. And I don't know if that's the right approach. My sense is that once we start to get a handle on real fake news and misinformation that's happening on such a broad scale, that Facebook may suffer as a result, because they weren't out in front of this issue. I see Twitter and I see Snapchat actually doing a lot more. And I think just generally speaking, it's like with those networks, it's like it's harder to sort of, you know, Twitter, you're limited to 140 characters. You can only say so much there.
Isn't it too? I think it just increased, didn't it? I don't do anything on Twitter.
Or maybe it did. But anyway, the point is, like, Facebook is just like, it's basically infinite. You can write, you can put Moby Dick in as as a single post.
People usually do that. Yeah.
Whereas with Twitter, it's like very limited, and they're also doing it also makes it easier to sort of fact check, I think, because there's less to see per tweet. So like the president actually shared something about vote by mail and saying that voting by mail is fraudulent, even though he does it at every election. And then Twitter was like, actually get the facts about vote by mail. And then his head like exploded. That's an example of fact checking of a tweet that I think is like important, and that I think needs to happen more. And the reason why I say that is to bring it back to your original point about feeling divided is like, if we can agree, we have to be able to agree on information, on the facts, because people are touting their own facts. It's like, oh, like, vaccines are bad. All vaccines are bad. Well, it's like we used to have thousands of children that would die from the measles like every year in this country. And then we had a measles vaccine, and now no one dies from the measles anymore. It's like, it's that simple. But there's still a big group of people that are going to will tell you that vaccines are bad, that mandatory vaccines are going to become law. And I'm giving people a little preview of what you might be recording later this afternoon. Mandatory vaccines are going to become law, and that we need to be afraid of that, and that we need to rise up against that. And I am not for freedoms being taken away from anyone, but mandatory vaccines, on a state level or national level, as far as like legislation, that there's no bills that are before Congress or before any state houses that are going to mandate that every citizen has to have a vaccine. It's like, no, like vaccines have, a stunning level of success. Anyway, I don't want to get stuck on vaccines, but the point is that people are not agreeing on the facts, whatever issue they're talking about. And so therefore they get split into these different camps and are being divisive. And I think now what you're seeing, especially with these protests, is there's so many instances of police violence against protesters, of police violence against the press. Like we're approaching 400 like documented cases, like video evidence of police pepper spraying press, of shooting rubber bullets against the press, of taking away or destroying their recording equipment, and it's like that's a freedom of the press and the First Amendment right there. It's like police are not allowed to do that, and yet they just brazenly are acting the way they're acting. And I get that they have a difficult job and they want to stay safe, but it's just like, I don't know. My sense is they are in a very real way, at the crux of the problem, that the systems that we have put in place to protect them is what's the problem here, that they have no consequences for their actions. It's like of the 14 high profile cases of police killing an unarmed man of color or woman of color, none of the officers have gone to jail. Zero.
Yeah, that's disgusting. It actually, something we brought up earlier. The film that you helped me make, Stomping Grounds.
Yeah, Stomping Grounds.
Inspired by a true story. I was 19 years old, encountered the law, made some really stupid mistakes. Right. I was actually talking to my girlfriend about this last night. I was like, I can't even imagine what going through that as a black man would have been like. Or if
I was thinking about that as well yesterday.
If I'd even be here talking to you, if it wouldn't have radically changed my life and a system that, it's scary to get into the system because it's sticky and you just feel like you're sinking deeper and deeper into it. I can see how people have repeat offenses and have such a chip on their shoulder, especially when it comes to police. I was 19, so fast forward a couple years after that, and I was still like super angry, and
Yeah.
I can't deny that probably a fair amount of that was like very misplaced, and I clearly had work to do on myself. But man, like the cops, and I don't mean to compare this against what's currently going on, but I've seen it and felt it. I mean,
Yeah.
just speaking in terms of like police authority and power, it's like sometimes you really want it, you really do. I mean, if your life is in danger, um, like just the other day, like I was pretty sure someone was trying to pick the lock on a door, and I was like, I called him up because I was like, hey, like I just want people to know that, in the area is this going on. And I felt like good, yeah. Like I wanna be on their side. I want their help, and I want to support the community. But yeah, it's a weird thing when people have power. I think too much of it can be intoxicating. Yeah, it's crazy.
I was there in the dorms when the police like were coming to arrest you, basically.
Yeah.
And they didn't give a single solitary F, They just like they came in and they went in straight into your room and they looked at everything, and then anytime they felt like it, any other student, if they spoke up or if they opened their door or anything, they just went into that person's room, and we were all white boys, they just went into that person and they turned it upside down. It was like in the movies when the mob comes in and is looking for the money.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like when
Yeah.
the police were going through our dorm rooms.
I mean,
And,
I think
there was one. I remember there was one kid who had like body odor, and he just didn't like know how to manage his body odor that well. His dorm always stank.
I know who
and
you're talking about.
like they were convinced that was marijuana. And, like completely ransacked his entire room looking for the drugs and didn't find it. And
Yeah.
like what would have happened had you been a man of color? Had there been other men of color like on the floor?
Well, and I'm trying to remember. I do remember a friend of mine. I don't know if memory's serving in that hallway, but I mean, yeah.
Well, regardless, if
Regardless.
you had been,
Right.
were the like person of interest or whatever.
Yeah.
And if you had been a man of color, like I don't even know what would have happened. Like they could have harmed you.
Oh, it's cutting out, but I'll just keep talking because the audio is good. Yeah, I mean that was by far the most terrified I've ever been in my life. I was it was so isolating, so scary, and of course you think your life is completely and utterly over, and then you're getting it's written up in the paper. Come Monday you're not going back to school. You don't have a job.
Your life changes overnight, and this is happening to like you
Yeah.
were at least over the age of 18. This is happening to young black boys at
Yeah.
the age of 12. It's
Yeah.
just like, of course, there's so much pent up anger. No wonder why people are protesting.
Yeah, again, that was a proud moment yesterday, and actually, what's crazy? I'll just bring this up, but I was going through the footage I shot yesterday. I don't know if you saw me share this on Facebook, but someone gave me the white power sign when I was walking through the crowd, and it was just plain as day. And I was
Someone
like,
did that.
yeah, like to their chest, and
Who's marching with us?
yeah. I mean,
You
that's
should out that person, dude.
no, I did. It's on Facebook, man.
Oh, okay,
Said,
okay, I haven't
do
seen
you
it.
recognize this man? I I put it up.
He was marching with us at a Black Lives Matter rally, and he gave the white power symbol.
Yeah. Well, that's
That
what.
is so messed up.
Sorry,
Was it the guy who got on the bullhorn and said all lives matter? Was it that guy?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I didn't stay for all of the talking on
Okay.
the gazebo. I stayed for about like a good whatever it was, hour and a half.
I gotta look this up right now. This is like
Yeah, check it out.
controversial.
It's very
I'm
controversial.
like getting riled up right now.
Yeah. Well, this is the point I was gonna make is that when
Yeah, sorry.
the force. No, it's good. This is fun actually. We should do this. But But like when the forces of good come together, I mean, what are you going to be surprised when the forces of bad don't show up?
Yeah.
To kick dirt on it, and I think that's something good to be vigilant about. I thought it was interesting too how the police, Fairfield, Iowa, yesterday were nowhere to be
Yeah,
found.
they were nowhere.
Well,
I
so
mean, the
what do you
protest
think
was
about
registered with the police.
that? Yeah, but what do you think about that? Do you think
Well,
that they
I mean,
had
it's-
any
I mean,
business being there?
We're a rural Iowa town. We have no history of police. Very little. I mean, I guess I was going to say no history of police brutality, but maybe that's not true. There's, I mean, the issues I think that are being faced. It's like probably relative to the population, there are less instances of police brutality. But what made me pause is because, like, Iowa's 92% white, and that 100% has to play into it. But yeah, I thought it was a smart move on their part to just not be there entirely, and to say that we trust the citizenry, and they were probably like nearby. I would bet you they were like 2 or 3 blocks away. Sorry, one sec. Can but there's a cat
It's a
that
kitty
made
cat.
it into the office here.
Nice. That's cool. I miss my cat.
But what was I saying? Yeah, the police were probably 2 or 3 blocks away, but I thought it was, a very nice move on their part to just not be seen if they weren't going to come join us and kneel in solidarity. That was probably second best.
Well,
So,
yeah, funny how I'm sure some people will think, "Hey, why the heck weren't they there?" And other people would be like, "Oh, that was an appropriate." See, like white person's perspective, but I feel like our cops do a pretty good job in this town. That these are human beings treating other human beings with respect. But so yeah, I guess as I think about it more, the fact that they weren't there is probably a good thing.
yeah. I mean, and
It could have
I would
escalated.
actually happen to agree with you about police generally doing a good job in this town, and probably there not being very many instances of police brutality from Fairfield, Iowa police on Fairfield, Iowa residents. But again, we're like almost all white here, and that has to be playing into it. If we had more of a community of color, I question whether that would be the case.
Yeah, I would be curious to know that as well. And honestly, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but part of the reason why I started this podcast was to get other opinions. So I would like to kind of poll some of our other friends and diverse friends to see what the other take is on this. I'd certainly love to hear it. I mean, for us living in Fairfield, I want to know what it is.
You should get those people on. You should get both Jeff Shipley and Phil Miller, who are running for the state house in this district, on your podcast. And I think you should get, if you can, you should get the Jefferson County Sheriff on
That
and
would
get
be
his
cool.
perspective as well. Get everyone's perspective so that we can
Yeah.
all see it. What does he think of the protests against police brutality, of police like beating unarmed people, peaceful protesters? What does he think of the president using an unidentified police force with no name tags and no like registration or badge numbers of any kind, clearing out peaceful protesters outside Washington D.C. so the dude could pose with a Bible? Like, what does he think of that? You should ask him.
I like that. That's good. Oh man. Yeah. Well, so what's next? What are we gonna do, man? What the way that we're handling the pandemic right now? Like, you think there's just gonna be some pot of gold for you, like in the next couple of weeks or months? Do you
Pot
think
of
it's
gold.
a pot of gold at the end of this magical rainbow that we're all seem to be traveling on?
Well, if this is a magical rainbow, then I question about how nice that pot of gold is going to be. 2 pandemics coming at the same time in 2020 here, coming out at the same time. I'm out. I don't know if I was ever in the prediction business. If I was in the prediction business, I'm out of the prediction business, because it's just impossible at this point. I mean, one thing that I think about right now is that it was like 4 months ago was the Iowa caucus. Like that was a long time. We've had
That feels like
the
a different
protests,
lifetime
we've
ago.
had the pandemic, we've had countless scandals out of the White House, and like international incidents happened since then. And we are 5 months away from the election. So it's like if all of this happened in 4 months, what's gonna happen in the next 5 months? I have no idea.
The timing is very suspect, to say the least. I'm not going to go into any conspiracy theories necessarily, but the timing is awfully convenient. Awfully convenient for somebody.
The timing of what?
Just how this all came down. How whatever billionaire class just increased their wealth by what was it, like $500 billion, like essentially overnight.
Yeah.
And how we are pending on like the biggest presidential election since
Certainly
we had
in our lifetimes.
in our lifetime,
possibly ever.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the we're here, we're in it, dude. I hope there's an election.
Yeah.
I seriously hope there's an
there's
election.
going to be an election.
You think so?
I mean, you think there are riots now? If there's no election, then it's democracy itself at stake, and I think everyone will see that. I
hope
think
so.
You'll see millions of people come out to the street, not hundreds of thousands, if that happens.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, that's good. That's assuring.
We'll have Hong Kong style protests instead of whatever we're doing now.
Yeah. I do believe it has the potential for getting better. But I also feel like it could go either way, and I'm not trying to be a doomsdayer, but I just think
We are at a defining moment of our country and of us as like a people here in the United States. I think you are 100% right about that. And yes, of course, there's the potential for it to get better. There's also the potential for it to get much worse. And we are at that crossroads now. And there's plenty of people trying to push that much worse, pull towards that direction. And we have to stand up and say no. That's how I see it. We have to stand up and say no. We're going to be the exceptional America of past eras, and we're gonna be better than that. We're going to bring up everyone, and become the place, the truly free place for all citizens, where all people can jog down the street or, do whatever and not feel like they're going to get murdered.
I sincerely
that has
hope
to
so.
happen for everyone.
Yeah.
Or we don't have a free society.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, I'm thinking we're getting to a good, perhaps, stopping place, at least on this first episode. Having you on as a guest. Again, I'm just like really honored to have you here. I feel like you've just been here since the beginning. We've done a lot together. I'm sure I'm going to have you on again, hopefully in person next time, because I think we have even more to talk about. At some point, we're going to get into what it was like being in a men's group together for several years. That was cool. I think that's something people might be interested in hearing more about. And I still dream about making another movie with you someday.
Someday.
I'm serious, dude. I don't know when it's going to happen, because that first one we did, for the folks listening, that was like a year and a half when my rent was $50 a month renting a bedroom. I didn't have to worry about bringing home the bacon like I do now. But I don't know, getting creative, doing the art, it's awesome.
It is awesome.
Yeah, so how do people find you if they want to check out the music or the record label? When are you going to do shows again? Any idea?
Oh, man. So we do live streams. We have a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Vibe.Digital USA is our live stream thing. We do one every other Saturday for 2 hours at 1 p.m. Central. As far as live events, giant question mark. I think probably we won't be doing live events until society at large is allowing musical events and sporting events to happen the way that it used to, and that might not happen until there's a vaccine. So who knows? It could be another year or 2 years before we really get back into the club and start playing music again. But if people want to find my music, my personal music, it's at Fumes, FYOOMZ. I'm the only person with that name. So you can basically Google it and find out my various profiles. Most of my music is on SoundCloud. Much of it is on Spotify and Apple Music and all of those other great streaming platforms. The record label probably has its biggest presence on SoundCloud. That's soundcloud.com/Vibe-Digital.
Awesome.
You want to find out what we're doing, the content we're putting out there.
That's great. I'm going to give it a listen to it after we're done here. But thanks again, man. Thanks for being my friend. Thanks for coming on the show, and we'll do it again soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, I hope so.
I want to make sure that I'm saving this and I'm not messing it up, but I think that's a wrap.